Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Natalia, I'm a fashion designer. Today we're going to be sewing a ruffle mini skirt. I'm going to be using this really cute lace for the outside of the fabric, and then the lining will be this black fabric. Let's get into the tutorial. As you can see, I have my pattern laid out and I'm making sure that everything is on the straight grain. On the pattern, there is a grain line. Take my ruler and I make sure that this line matches up with the length grain of the fabric. I am cutting out 2 sets of lining for this skirt because lining number 1 will be treated like a backing fabric. Now that everything's cut out, it's time for the actual fun part, which is sewing the skirt. I'm gonna remove this little prototype from the mannequin and I'm gonna pin on the pieces of the lace because, I don't know, I just find it to be like very motivating to kind of see it on the mannequin, and I think it helps like visualize what the skirt is gonna look like. This fabric is so cute. It's been in my fabric stash forever and I've just been trying to use up the fabric that I already have instead of buying more fabric. Yeah, I just have like bins of fabric in my basement. We used up a little bit, so it's good. Generally, this is what it's gonna look like. Obviously, it's very loosely pinned, but it'll have a ruffle all the way around. It'll have a center back zipper. There will be black lining underneath this. So I think it's super cute. For the ruffle, I am doing French seams. I'm pinning the fabric wrong side to wrong side, which feels illegal, but just trust me. I'm sewing 1/4 inch seam. Then I am trimming it just a bit. I'm opening it up, pressing it flat with the iron, and then I'm folding it over so that the raw edge is nicely tucked on the inside. Then I'm going to sew it at 1/4 inch to enclose the raw edges. And there is the French seam, looks beautiful. The ruffle is fully sewn together. Now we're going to work on the front. So we're going to work on this panel and add in the dart. I brought my home sewing machine here because I need to use a zigzag stitch. Here is my ruffle, and to prevent the bottom of the ruffle from fraying, we are going to do a small zigzag stitch all around the edge of this ruffle. There are other ways to finish the edge. You could do an overlock with an overlock machine. You could do a bias tape finish, but I don't think that would look good with the lace. I want something as least noticeable as possible. This sewing machine has a zigzag option and my industrial machine does not, so that's why I have it here with me. I'm zigzagging along the outer edge of the ruffle. I'm keeping the stitch narrow for a neat, lightweight finish. I'm marking the dart with a contrast color thread. I'm matching my notches and pinning the dart. Then I'm going to sew from point to point. I'm sewing the dart. You could use chalk too, but I'm kind of experienced with sewing and I don't want to damage this fabric, so using just a little contrast thread as a guide works for this type of fabric. I'm pressing the dart towards the side seam. For the back darts, I'm doing the same exact thing. I'm marking it with contrasting thread for visibility. I'm pinning the dart, I'm matching the notches, and I'm going to sew the darts. I'm just going to sew those. These darts are bigger than the darts on the front. I'm just so excited to be making videos again. Last year, I really didn't put out many videos at all. I just want to post more videos without being like overly critical of myself. I feel like when you film yourself a lot, you start to become nitpicky about the way you look on camera. I also want to reach out to more people and make like more connections. I feel like I have a lot of internet friends that I've met from YouTube or TikTok, Instagram, whatever. And I feel like it would just be like fun to meet people IRL. Anyway, tangent. Let's get back to sewing the dart. Cute. I will remove the orange thread that was just like to mark where the dart ends. Don't neglect pressing your seams and darts. So we are going to press these darts towards the side seam, which is like the curved part. You can use a you should use a pressing cloth, especially if you have nice fabric, but I am not using one just for demonstration purposes. Okay, let's move on to the zipper. I'm placing the two backs right side to right side, and I am pinning them. I'm measuring where the zipper will end, which is 8.5 inches from the top edge, and then mark with a pin or with chalk. Then I'm sewing at 1/2 of an inch seam allowance with a 5 stitch length until I hit where the zipper will end. Then I switch to a 2.5 stitch length, which is like my standard, back tack, and then sew the rest of the way down. I'll explain why we're doing this in a second. The back panel is sewn together with 1/2 of an inch seam allowance. The first 8.5 inches are done on the longest stitch length, and the bottom part is done with a normal stitch length, which is 2.5. I am going to press this seam open, and then we are going to add in the invisible zipper. Also, side note, how cute is this scarf that I knitted? I thrifted this knitting machine at Goodwill for $12. I mean, I did have to buy like the missing parts for like an additional $40 on eBay. So it was around 50 bucks for the whole thing. But it makes knitting so fast and so fun. I definitely have to do a little video on it. So yeah. I'm pressing the center back seam open. Now I'm pressing the coils open on the invisible zipper. I really want it to be flat. This technique will help you sew as close as possible to the zipper, and it will give you a really neat finish. I'm marking where I want my zipper to end. I just put a little pin in, you can do chalk, but. And then I'm pinning the zipper tape onto the seam allowance, and I am basting the zipper on, which just means hand sewing it on with long stitches. This makes it easier to sew on the machine. I'm seam ripping the center back seam, like only the part where it had the long stitch length. Then I am unzipping the zipper all the way down, and I use a tool to pull it all the way down to the end. Now that the zipper is out of the way, it'll make it really easy to sew close to the edge. So I switched to my invisible zipper foot, and I'm sewing a little bit past where I want my zipper to end. I go ahead and I'm zipping it back up. It looks good, so I am going to unzip it again. I am cutting the end of the zipper. I'm sewing around the coil just with like a hand needle and thread to create a stopper. So don't skip this part, otherwise you'll lose your zipper, like you'll lose your zipper pull. Okay, so I'm placing the front pieces right side to right side with the back part of the skirt, and I am sewing on the side panels on at 1/2 of an inch seam allowance. Press the seam allowance open. This is what we have so far. I pinned the skirt. As you can see, I haven't sewn this seam yet, but everything else is sewn. The zipper is in, all the darts are in, side seam is in. I'm pinning this so you got a general idea of how it will look. So this straight edge just, you know, it'll be here, and then this will go all around. You see this seam right here will match with the side seam right here. The other side seam will match the side seam. The center of the ruffle will match the center back. And this part of the skirt will match here. It's really gently pinned, but I just wanted you to be able to visualize what it looks. Now we'll go ahead and pin it on the table. I'm pinning the ruffle onto the skirt, right side to right side. I'm pinning carefully around the curved part, and I'm matching the seams on the ruffle with the seams on the skirt. I'm basting the ruffle on since this fabric is like a little bit tricky to work with, and it'll just be easier to sew without the pins in the way. I'm sewing the ruffle on at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'm gonna sew the front panel and the front side panel together. So this is just a little demonstration. So far it's looking cute, but as you can see, like, that's the part that's still not sewn together yet. That's what we're gonna tackle. I'm folding the ruffle up to get it out of the way when I'm sewing the seam. So I'm folding the skirt right side to right side, and I've pinned the seam, and now I am basting it, and I'm going to sew the seam at 1/2 inch seam allowance, and that's what it looks like. I'm removing the basting, and now we are onto the lining. The lining is sewn the exact same way as the skirt minus the ruffle. I'm folding the lining, I'm marking where the zipper ends on the center back. I'm going to sew at a 5 stitch length until the marked point, and then I'm going to sew the rest of the way down at a 2.5 stitch length. I'm pressing the seam open. I'm doing 2 linings for the skirt because I don't want the raw edges to be visible through the lace. I'm placing this lining wrong side of the lace to right side of the lining, and I'm pinning the 2 pieces together at the waistline. My skirt still has raw edges on the inside, so that's where lining number 2 comes in. Fold the lining right side to right side and pin the center back. I'm marking the end of the zipper, doing the same exact thing as last time. I'm pressing the center back seam open, and I'm going to put this lining on the side for now. Okay, I'm seam ripping the center back lining seam until the end of the zipper. I'm attaching the first lining to the edge of the zipper, so I'm treating it like a backing. So this is what it looks like pinned. I'm going to baste the lining, well, it's the backing, to the skirt. I'm going to sew at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I did that, so now I'm removing all of the basting. I'm sewing the hem of the lining to the ruffle seam allowance. This is what it looks like sewn at 1/2 inch seam allowance. Flip it to the right side. And now it's time for lining number 2, the real lining. Place the lining right side to right side, pin the waistline, and sew at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Take the lining out. Seam rip the center back until the marked point where the zipper ends. I'm pinning the lining to the edge of the zipper, right side to right side. Also, sorry, I got a little grainy here. And I'm going to sew it at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I switched over to my zipper foot to get as close to the zipper as possible. And I do this for both sides of the zipper. I'm trimming the corners to make it less bulky when I flip it inside out. I'm pulling the lining out and I'm pressing the seam allowance towards the lining, then I will be top stitching. So as you can see, the seam allowance goes towards the lining. And I'm using a blunt edge to poke the corners out before I do the top stitching. I'm switching back to my regular sewing foot. And I make sure that the seam allowance is facing towards the lining. I'm top stitching the edge of the lining. So that's done. So now I'm gonna press the seam allowance up, like right above the ruffle. I folded and pressed the lining hem by 1/2 inch as well, so everything is nicely enclosed, and I'm pinning the seam allowances together. I want the raw edges to be enclosed so it's not like scratching on your skin. Then I whip stitch the lining to the skirt. And this is the final result. I started this video in January, which is so embarrassing. It's October now, but this is the skirt. It looks pretty cute. It is a little too short, and that's why I was hesitant to post this video in the first place, because it didn't come out as perfect as I wanted it to. Also, I did the lining in kind of a quirky way. If I were to do it again, I would have treated the first lining and the lace fabric as one cohesive piece of fabric. So yeah, basically I would have treated it like a backing and then done a lining instead of doing it the way that I did it, which, you know, it's a mistake. So that's kind of another reason why I was hesitant to make this video, like to finish this video and post it, because I obviously don't want to show people that I make mistakes when sewing. My cats are about to get into a little fight for the window space. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye. Here's a little bit of B-roll of me trying to get a good YouTube thumbnail. Again, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you learned something. If you have any questions or suggestions on what my next video should be, please let me know. And I appreciate you guys so much.